Hello, everyone. I'm animator Mark Kausler. You're listening to the Skull Rock Podcast.
Skull Rock Podcast is brought to you by the generosity of the following companies. The Old Mill Press, publishing beautifully crafted books that illuminate our world. To learn more, visit theoldmillpress.com. And by listeners like you.
Aye, mateys, remember this as the day you sailed with the Skull Rock Podcast. Proceed at your own risk, and mark well me words, mateys. Dead men tell no tale.
Welcome back to yet another edition of Skull Rock Podcast, the show about all things Disney and pop culture. Every week we take you behind the scenes of some of your favorite Disney films, theme park attractions, performances, books, music, as well as what's streaming, what's in theaters, and what's happening in this multiverse of entertainment. I'm Aljon, your lifelong Disney, Marvel, Star Wars fan and pop culturist, and you can email me, Aljon, A-L-J-O-N, at skullrockpodcast.com.
And I'm Dave Bossert, artist, filmmaker, and author, and welcome to the Skull Rock Podcast. If you love Disney and pop culture, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also like and follow us on Facebook, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, LinkedIn, and on our Skull Rock YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You can also email me at dave@skullrockpodcast.com.
Hey you, it's Aljon breaking into this show, letting you know that we're here, albeit a little late, but we're here nonetheless, bringing you this amazing first part interview with Tad Stones from Disney Animation. He's worked on so many great shows, animated series like Darkwing Duck, producing Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers, The Adventures of the Gummi Bears, Aladdin, Hercules, Bud Lightyear, Star Command, so many more awesome projects. So let's sit back and relax and listen to Dave, talk to Tad, talking about animation, talking about Disney TV, Disney Channel, and so many awesome projects from the very beginning. And this is just part one. So sit back and relax and enjoy Tad Stones right here on Skull Rock Podcast.
Hey, let's chat.
Let's chat.
So let's chat now.
Let's chat afterwards.
And he said, let's chat again.
Skull Rock Podcast. Interview time.
Well, Aljon, here we are. We've got a really incredible guest this week, like we do every week. But I have to say, we have Tad Stones, who started out at Walt Disney Animation Studios and worked at Imagineering, and is really one of the founding fathers of Walt Disney television animation. Yeah, it goes back that far. So, Tad, welcome to the Skull Rock Podcast.
Hey, happy to be here.
You know, I'm just so excited that we reconnected, because it's been, decades really since we've seen each other. And
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you what I always ask our guests. How did you get involved in animation and find your way to Walt Disney Animation Studios?
Well, I loved animation from when I was a little kid. And, I was born in 52. And so in the 50s, there used to be television shows like Walter Lantz had a Woody Woodpecker show where he drew in between and he talked about animation that way. And the Disneyland show with Walt, every once in a while, he'd go behind the scenes, and whether it was about Disneyland or to the animators. And I was just fascinated by that. Plus, my dad had the Preston Blair
The Walter Foster,
Preston Blair.
Everybody who's gone into animation has that. I have one over on my shelf.
Oh, exactly. And in fact, when I first went to feature animation, that's where I started. Everybody there had the same book. And so I was fascinated by that. I knew how it went, loved flip books. My dad worked at Carnation Company. And of course, Carnation's connected to Disneyland through the restaurant they have. And, it was always a partnership, which meant the company picnics were at Disneyland once a year. And it's funny, where Pirates of the Caribbean is right now used to be just grass with picnic tables. And they would have a big tent put up in the lawn. And I remember seeing the Golden Horseshoe Review did a show with Wally Bogue and his, and they're on the lawn especially just for us. And then I remember that, and this is only how crazy it is in hindsight. Then they would play bingo, and now I think, Disneyland is right over there. It's literally like 100 feet over there. Maybe we could go, and after a while they'd open up the back gates and we'd enter through a back way into Disneyland. So I always had that connection. And on one of those Disneyland trips, they used to have an art of animation exhibit, and my dad bought for me, the Bob Thomas book, The Art of Animation, which focused on Sleeping Beauty, but took you through every step of the process of what makes an animated film.
And that really was one of the first serious animation books on Disney Animation, and that's the late 50s.
Yeah, exactly. And now supposedly, and I don't know if this is true or not because I've never seen the page, but like the first edition of the book was before the Xerox process had really brought down costs. And so evidently the last discussion with Walt was mostly about audio animatronics and, kind of the new, I don't think he was negative toward animation, but it was kind of like, oh, here's the new stuff. And then, that brought the cost down, kept things going. So luckily I got the version, if that first version is even true, I got the version where he's totally up, in the animation and everything. So, but no, I love that book. And like I said, the TV shows, I always wanted to be in animation. And I would do flip books, in the margins of school books and things like that, and paperback books. Then when I was in high school, and along the way, I discovered, I had always read comics, starting with, Disney and Casper the Friendly Ghost, or better yet, Spooky and Hot Stuff. And then I knew the DC line in the Silver Age, which was full of silly stuff that I would mine years later with Darkwing Duck. And then the beginning of Marvel Comics, and that really excited me. So I really wanted to be in animation, but when I was in high school, I just felt like there's only one place I want to work, because they're the only place in town that's doing full animation, and that's Disney. And they have their guys. They literally have the same guys who started with Walt, the 9 old men, which turns out was kind of true at the time I was thinking that. So I started thinking about, do I want to get into comics, or, and then I went to college. And
where did you go to college, and what was your
Loyola
major?
University. Then it was Loyola Marymount University, or it was just switching to Loyola Marymount University down in Westchester near the airport.
Yeah.
And my major was art only the first year. And then my English teachers wanted me to switch to English, or consider that, because of my writing. And that I was debating that. And then the school came up with a new major called Humanities. And it sounded like it was almost a design your own major, and I could take writing and art. So I switched to that. And then ironically, all the art courses I took were like three-dimensional stuff. In other words, they were ceramics and metalwork and jewelry making. I didn't go back into like what I really would have paid off, more drawing, painting, and all of that. But it did pay off, because, and I'll get into the story of how I ended up in the business. The girlfriend I was, obviously my girlfriend at the time, had a suite mate who was Tori Atencio. Her father was ex Atencio, who, worked with Ward Kimball and layout artist, and then did the Man in Space stuff, I think, with Ward. And then, ended up in in WED, or what is now Imagineering. Well, she knew about this training program. I went, training program? What? Because she said, because I had done cartoons all through college, just for the newspaper or flyers for, concerts or whatever. And she told me the guy to call was, and it's an easy name that I wouldn't forget, was named Donald Duckwall.
Yeah.
And anyway, I called up. Remember, I wasn't an art major. This is my senior year. Time to get serious about what's happening next. The summer of my junior year, I said to myself, this is my last year before real life. So I had been a camp counselor for 2 summers. And this time, all I did was try to sell gag cartoons to magazines, which was still a thing back then. And I tried a comic strip, but mostly that. And that, again, paid off later, that I'll get to. Anyway, so senior year was like, okay, now real life has to start. So it's like this training program. I call, and I was just calling for information. And they just assumed I was going to come in. So it was like, why don't you come in? Like, we're having a review board meeting coming up soon. Why don't you come in? I don't think it was more than a week away, maybe 2. So there was a date, and now I had to come up with a portfolio. Not an art major, don't have a portfolio. And they had told me, the kind of stuff they wanted to see in terms of life drawing and action work and all of that. Well, when I was in ceramics, I became the TA, the teacher's assistant to the ceramics teacher. It just so happened he had just taken over the art department while the head of the art department was on sabbatical. And I went to him, because I was still working with him, and described my situation, and can I sit in on some life drawing classes? And he was a huge fan. He could do the goofy yell, on his own, and he demonstrated it for me. But he loved that stuff. So he talked to the teachers and all that. And because otherwise it's really weird that this guy wants to suddenly come in on life drawings. Anyway, I did some of that, and I, watched television sports, and this was before tapes. So you just had to watch it and kind of get that. But my dad had wanted to be a cartoonist, but he graduated in the Depression. It was more about feeding your face than feeding your dreams. And he ended up, again, at Carnation Company, and ultimately did use his art sensibilities at the very end. But he had drawing books, and more than drawing books, he had cartooning books. And he had the famous artist cartoon course. And part of that was Willard Mullen was the sports cartoonist that really exaggerated his drawings of sports figures. And I had, again, grown up with that. So I used that to exaggerate the action that I could see. And then I cheated. I was never a big sports guy, but the other guys in the dorm wing were, and I got their copies of Sports Illustrated and kind of drew action sketches from something that stayed still. Anyway, I put that in. And then that was my portfolio that I, took into Disney. They liked what they saw. They said, oh, we'd like to see more quick sketches like you've done here. Now, once I got in, I realized that guys went in and had meetings, and then they'd come back 6 months later or something. I assumed they wanted it immediately. And maybe they did, since they originally had set the meeting saying, oh, we've got this review board coming up. But anyway, I went back in and did more of the same, and just action sketches, just the stuff that they liked. And they said even quicker sketches than this, like gesture drawings. I think that paid off, because obviously in animation, you have to turn out a lot of drawings. They liked the action. They actually thought, they were intrigued by the idea that I drew off the TV instead of going to the zoo or something. So that helped me as far as the prolificness of, showing up with this stuff. Anyway, went in, kind of got a little tour through the training rooms. And in that, when I first visited, I believe it was Ron Clemens, Andy Gaskell, who became a great art director and was a fantastic animator. I think John Pomeroy was still in the room, and Al Huck, who was a guy in the animation industry. And then by the time, and they were working on Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2, I think, whatever the third one was.
That'd be the late 60s, right? Or no, the early 70s.
Well, I've graduated in 74, so I don't know whether it was the second or third, but the point is, when I had my first meeting, they said something like, well, you'd be in animation. And back there, the mindset was, you're going to work here the rest of your life, unless you really mess up.
Right.
And I mean, all companies thought that way. So it was kind of like, oh, it'll take you this long to become an animator, and if you get this much footage, and years from now, you could be a directing animator. It was this big, long thing. Well, between the time I was basically accepted and then started 3 days after graduation, so in June, and this would have been early May, I think, that I had the meeting. Basically, there had been a kind of a mini rebellion, because whichever Winnie the Pooh it was, the young animators, the quote trainees or recent trainees, did the majority of the animation there. They turned out, enough footage not only to get a credit, but I don't even know that they were going to, whatever, I forget the details. But the point was, we did all this work percentage-wise. What's on the screen, we carried it. So if you have arbitrary footage numbers, they felt was unfair. It's out the window, because we did this thing. And so when I got him back, suddenly a bunch of those guys were animators, and they had offices, downstairs in the other wings, and kind of things started the big change. I survived the training program, which was 8 weeks of drawing, and I think we did 8 weeks since.
And that was Eric Larson was running the
training
program.
That was it. And one of my regrets is, because I had this knowledge of animation, I feel I didn't use Eric enough. I should have just been in there bugging him, showing him stuff to just soak up all the knowledge. He was great, nicest guy in the world. But anyway, all I did, my first test, which today, if you look at tests people bring in, having been to animation schools, they're full color soundtrack, beautiful things, of course, because of computers too. Mine was just an alligator in a pirate hat. And he just did a little jig, flipped his wooden sword up in the air and caught it with his tail. And I don't think it was much more than that. But they liked it because it had life. And I think Wooly Reitherman said, I really got a sense of his personality, which is what they care about. My second test was, everybody was talking about the Black Cauldron. The Black Cauldron was like the carrot that was constantly dangled in front of the young people. And yet I think, Frank and Ollie and Milt would love to go out on a big feature too. It just time-wise kept being redeveloped and all that. Anyway, my second test was a character who I don't even think is in the final movie, but whatever, just a character I designed based on something from the book, just carrying this big bone down steps, and there's a big cauldron next to him, and then he's stirring it with a bone or something. Anyway, he looks up and here's the Horn King, which is the stiffest character I've ever drawn. Just this guy in a hood who just raises his arms and is casting a spell or something. And the guy transforms into a dinosaur, and a bunch of drool comes out of his mouth, which I guess was funny because this is all shot just on paper. And when you send something to the camera, the lower down the level is, the more of a shadow it casts on the layers going up. And I guess the drool was on the bottom layer. So, and I had just learned the drool from looking at, we could check out the actual animation scenes from all the features. And I looked at some of that and said, oh, okay, this is what we do. And here's the timing. And I guess Frank Thomas said, that came out and they went, ooh, it was the drool more than anything else. But anyway, I survived that. and you immediately became an in-betweener, which is the job that almost got me fired because I was terrible at in-betweening. I had lunch with Ron Clemens recently because I in-between for him. And when I brought that up, he said, "Oh yeah, I was really bad." And one of my memories of doing that in-betweening was Ron needed something really fast. I had done it, and Ron kind of came out wondering, what did you do different? What did you do? And I realized he was shocked because it was good. And part of me, years later, after I was in story, I realized, this is what I was getting wrong. I wasn't thinking of it. I was thinking too much about lines instead of almost drawing a sculpture in between the other two sculptures, kind of thing,
volume, the volume.
And I started to think, they just didn't explain it right. And then I realized, no, they did explain that. I just wasn't getting it. It didn't click. Anyway, the other thing that happened is, of course, I married that girlfriend who's been my wife now for almost 50 years, coming up soon. Anyway, so obviously that paid off. But I struggled through in-betweening, and the only way you got ahead was in personal tests that you did in your spare time.
Yeah.
And I was constantly coming up with different ideas and starting them and then putting them aside and all that. And I had done one that they liked of, in fact, I put it online, of just three foxes. It was Brer Fox, Honest John, basically seeing this roast on a fire and sneaking up to steal it, and then fighting with each other. And then I think Brer Fox gets a rubber-tipped arrow on his nose. Gets shot by it. And you cut to a very stiff Robin Hood, doffing his hat. That went over well. But then I kept coming up with ideas, trying to do them, and didn't make much, I always felt like I stopped it and did a different idea. And I had one of Merlin and Madame Mim sitting at a table with a back and forth. And, I forget all the details of that. And there's a tragic story that I'll get to. Anyway, we all had moviolas in our room because this is before video and video tests and all that.
We used to call them the green dinosaurs.
Yeah, except we had one of the old ones, the black ones that date back to the Hyperion studio or something. Anyway, I had it on, and Ed Hansen, the manager of the department, came by. He said, "Ed, can you come in?" Because I thought I had this old test, and I'm thinking of going back into it and finishing it up and all that. And Ed looked, he said, "No, you should just show it as is. This is great, and fantastic." So I felt pretty good, except then he said, "Yeah, we had kind of given up on you." Thinking that it was well, what? It was like, what? There's no 6-month review that you kind of tell people what's going on or what they should be doing.
Geez. So
God knows if they had given up with considering the quality, quote, of my in-betweening. Amazing. Anyway, I actually got a boost to assistant animator. I have one scene in The Rescuers of Bernard tiptoeing across a desk. But I realized, looking back on things, that I was more interested in, although I enjoyed animation, I love the process that isn't there anymore, I guess, but flipping animation drawings between your fingers and seeing your drawings come to life right there in your hands. I just love that part. I was terrible at flipping to show people stuff, but rolling it on the desk was great. But I realized that I'd rather come up with what the characters do than make them do it. And I realized that's storyboarding. And I got a chance to move into story. They were very open to it. Working for Wooly Reitherman.
I was going to say, who are some of the people that were in the story department that you got to work with? Aside from Wooly.
Yeah, Wooly was the director, but Mel Shaw was there. Oh, wait, before I forget, the tragic story that I was going to mention is everybody did these personal tests. And before there was a video system of people, doing their own tests, and ultimately computers where they did it. There was this reel of personal tests of everybody, going back to Don Bluth, Dale Bear, John Pomeroy, Ed Gombert, Randy Cartwright, all these guys, Glenn Keane. I came to this studio like 5 or 6 months after Ron Clements, and then Glenn Keane started about 3 months after me. And all these people's work were in this reel, literally one reel. They lost that reel. Nobody knows what happened to it. I happened to have a couple of my tests given to me when I left the department. And that's one of the few surviving tests. So all the stuff, that's why when I say, I think this happened and this, it's because all that stuff is gone.
Wow.
And famously, Ron Clements did a test of Cruella de Vil that was, and I am not exaggerating here, easily feature quality could have been in the show, could have been in the movie. In fact, Milk Hall said as much. Now they showed it to Mark Davis, and Mark was saying, well, she would never do that because she took a pratfall in it. But it was just amazing. And going into Fox and Hound, Ron got the owl voiced by Pearl Bailey, and just her sequences really didn't give him a chance to show off. Had he gotten like the hunter, the human character of that movie, he really could have. I think people don't realize how good an animator, Ron was, because he didn't do that much before he moved into story and directing. Anyway, on Fox and Hound, I was working with, for Wooly, and basically even in the Rescuers, I did pitch a board because I was looking at this movie as is, and there was no sequence where Madame Medusa had a scene with Penny, the little girl who the Rescuers are trying to rescue. And I pitched something where Penny is coming in and she's treating very mean. And I got to pitch that to, Wooly, Milk Hall, and Frank and Ollie, and, whoever else was there. And Milk kind of said, well, she wouldn't be that direct or that mean or something like that. And I didn't realize till this happened later is I guess that was enough of an idea that they realized, hey, is there something to that? She should have a face thing. And they gave the sequence I did to Vance Gary, who came up with the fantastic idea, because this is what made Milt love it, that why not have Medusa, instead of just sitting there, have her take off her makeup while she's talking to the little girl, which added all sorts of entertainment to it, And it was told to me later by Pete Young that, oh yeah, that wouldn't be in without you, and Vance gave you credit and all that, which was great, even though on that, I also worked next to Mel Shaw. Ken Anderson wasn't working on Fox and Hound at the time, but he was like a room across from me, which was great. And whoever else was in the department at the time, Pete Young, Vance Gary, Fred, I forget what Fred's last name. But the thing is, when I started working, the first sequence I was given to do was they had animated a bunch of stuff with Chief Hurt and working with Copper and whatever it was. And it was basically, here's existing footage. Here's the kind of sequence we need. See if you can use the existing footage. So I did that kind of, wove it together and, did temp dialogue and whatever. And they liked that. And then I worked on another sequence. And this time I was in a room real close to Mel Shaw, who worked in pastels, these gorgeous pastels. So I tried doing my stuff in pastels too. And Mel would come in and give me hints. It was, again, a great teaching experience or learning experience for me, where he'd touch up my stuff and say, this is how you can suggest the forest behind them, or, rub this and all that. So when my stuff was pinned up, I didn't realize it at the time, but when my stuff was pinned up, if you weren't paying attention and just walked into my room, you might assume it was Mel's work. Not if you really looked at it, because he's a marvelous draftsman, but because he had put his touches in, and then I was trying to imitate those touches. You know, that was that. So, and I bring that up because skipping over some years where I'm over at Imagineering, and I get called back to Ed Hanson's office, and he's basically going to tell me that you're not getting a credit on Fox and Hound. Now, this is before, I think it started with Black Cauldron, where credits went on forever, and
Right.
starting with, the science fiction films, I think, of Lucas and Spielberg, where they gave credit to all these people who worked on it. And now everybody gets a credit. Babies who are born during production get credits.
The coffee guy gets credit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the baby of the coffee guy. Yeah. Anyway, he was telling me I'm not going to get a credit and all that. He says, but the show's looking really good. And I said, I kind of knew it because Wooly had been shoved out, and Art Stevens, Rick Rich, and Ted Berman, took over.
Yeah.
Anyway, I kind of expected it. I was always a guy who kind of went, yeah, I know how things work. I get it. Instead of putting up a fight of any sort. And Ed goes on to say, yeah, it was really coming together. I just, looking at the sequence where the hunter is laying traps with copper. I said, yeah, that's my sequence. I did that. And again, it was one of those things where they used my sequence. People didn't think about it. They might have, it wouldn't look like, oh, who drew that? It would have just assumed it's more Mel's work or whatever. And the fact that I didn't put up a fight, and I did point out the work I had done, it says, I'm going to talk to them and bring it up again. And he did. They said no, because I hadn't worked with any of the guys. And it didn't bother me until I learned in the credits, Squeaks, the little caterpillar, got a credit. Squeaks as himself, because Squeaks was just a sound effect. And they just thought it would be a funny gag of putting his name and as himself. And I'm thinking, my name isn't that long.
Oh,
You're just talking about, a little piece of line on a card. So, I mean, it's not like I raised a stink, but it was just irritating that, but I think the non-existent caterpillar got a credit and I didn't.
But that was the time period, when, they were very strict about you had to do 100 feet of animation to get credit, those kinds of things. There was a strictness to it.
Well, the thing, the thing
rules.
was, yeah, exactly. But in story, it was more the director just saying it. There was no, how many minutes did he board? Because, in story, everybody contributes and has another meeting and stuff like that.
So really, you should have gotten a credit.
I would think so.
If
except,
Wooly was
it's
still
out
there.
of sight. Yeah, because I would have done more work for him too. But it was more out of sight, out of mind. I think there was a point where they weren't sure what to do with me. It's like I had done good work, but they had me do an educational film called Help in Alcohol Abuse. And I think that, again, produced by an animator, an animation house in New Zealand that I think was called the Lounsbury Studios, because the guy had been an assistant of John Lounsbury and just, worshipped him. Again, John, one of the 9 old men who died while we were there.
Yeah. I mean, he was the first of the 9 old men to go, and he went young.
Yeah. Anyway, I think because of that, the fact I had done this educational thing, Ron Miller sent me over to, WED to work on Epcot Center. And at first they weren't sure.
And I was going to ask you, so essentially you're doing boards on Fox and the Hound, and then they have you move on to an educational film.
Yeah, which I my first producer credit, but I storyboarded it all. So it was literally, I produced it in that I created the project, I wrote it, storyboarded it. So it was just me. And then it was sent to these guys who did a great job, animating it and really producing it. So that was kind of like, hey, that's a perfect fit for, edutainment over at Red, what was going on.
For Epcot, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that led to, they weren't sure where to put me at first, but then they put me with Ward Kimball. And it was great. So Ward was in like 3 days a week or whatever, and I was in a room with him, like an 8x12 room, and that was fantastic.
So I actually think that this is a really great place for us to break.
Sure.
And I want to come back next week and actually pick up on your time at Imagineering and how that went. So if that's okay with you, I'm going to say goodbye.
All right.
Tad Stones, thank you for being on the Skull Rock podcast. This is week 1 of what I think is going to be many weeks, because you have had an illustrious career.
Why would you scare off people like that?
But we'll talk to you next week.
All right, Dave. See you then.
Skull Rock Podcast, where you hear the stories behind the adventures.
Let's get out of here!
Come on, Scotty, let's get out of here.
Let's get out of here.
Let's get out of here.
Let's get out of here, Lieutenant.
Skull Rock Podcast is now on Patreon. Dive deeper into the world of animation, films, and behind-the-scenes stories with your hosts, Aljon Go and Dave Bossert. Not only will you be helping to keep the magic alive, but you will be part of our special community with ad-free episodes. We want to thank friend of the show, Joshua Volkert, as well as Skull Rock crew members, Steve Minch and Chris Banis, for their support. If you would like to join our Skull Rock crew, please visit our Patreon link in our show notes or visit patreon.com/Skull Rock Podcast. Thank you for listening and for your continued support of everything we do.
As Dave said, if you want more, check it out. It's all there at skullrockpodcast.com. We encourage you to check that out. Also, be sure to like us, share us, subscribe to us on YouTube. That is a great place for everyone to check out the Vault shows as well. And you can even interact with us and leave us those comments. We do encourage that. Follow us on X, Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, LinkedIn. Dave and I are both on there. You can send us those notes as well. And we would appreciate you writing those emails, Dave at skullrockpodcast.com or Aljon, ALJON, at skullrockpodcast.com. Quick shout out to our friends at Sorcerer Radio at srsounds.com. All Disney music all day long. You can also follow me on Instagram at AljonGo, and our other podcast with myself and my wife, Kristen Hetzel and Kat Arcori. It's called Dining at Disney. We drop a show every single week talking about the theme parks and Disney food. Once again, Dining at Disney on everywhere you find podcasts. Dave?
Yeah, and as always, you can check me out on the Tunes Behind the Tunes on Sirius XM, Disney Hits, Channel 133. Any of my books are available at theoldmillpress.com. You can also go to my website, davidbossert.com, for all kinds of free content and free stuff that you can mail away for. So with that, Aljon, I'm going to say, go out and have a fantastic week. We'll be back here next week with a brand new interview with producer, artist, animator Tad Stones. And he's going to be talking about the formation, the infancy of Disney TV animation. Amazing. It's a really great interview, and it's going to be multiple parts. So I think October, next week, we're going to kick off Tad Stones month.
Awesome.
Here at the Skull Rock Podcast. So with that, go out, have a fantastic week. We will talk to you next week right here on the Skull Rock Podcast.
Skull Rock fam, it's Aljon, back with another Disney travel deal for Kristen this week. And there is an opportunity for you to save big. This spring, save up to $250 per night on a 4-day or longer Walt Disney vacation. And this is for a ticket and room package for select Disney resort hotels. that are taking place from February 22nd to July 25th of next year, 2026, as I record this. Awesome. So save up to $250 per night, $150 per night for most days from Sunday to Thursday nights from January 4th to February 19th of 2026. Pretty cool. All of these resorts are eligible. You have Bay Lake Tower at Disney's Contemporary, Boulder Ridge Villas at Disney's Wilderness Lodge, Disney Vacation Club cabins over at Fort Wilderness, which are awesome, by the way. I just saw them. They're awesome. Disney's Animal Kingdom, Jambo House, Condande Village. You've got Disney's Beach Club, just a wide swath of their resorts. Very, very cool stuff. A lot of them are going to be in the deluxe category. So go ahead, book that trip. Now, if you want to save $150 a night, not $250, that would be at moderate resort hotels like Caribbean Beach, Coronado Springs, my personal favorite, and then Port Orleans, French Quarter, or Riverside. Now, there are also deals, though, for the All-Stars and kind of the value resorts as well, $75 per night, which is great. So all kinds of opportunities for you to save. All you have to do to get started and save on your next Disney vacation, Walt Disney World in particular, for this particular deal, is email my wife, Kristen. She will be the key to help you save time, money, and aggravation. All you have to do is email her, Kristen, at magicaljourneysvacations.com. That's Kristen, Kristen, at magicaljourneysvacation.com. Save time, money, and aggravation, and book your deal today. Get your free quote. You won't regret it.